The smoke of Satan. Hello and welcome to the Smoke of Satan. My name is Joseph Cillo Jr. I am the writer of edgy Catholic fiction. I've written a thriller, When the Wood is Dry, an edgy Catholic thriller, and my comic book and graphic novel, Blind Prophet, and my Christmas book, Merry Friggin' Christmas, an edgy Christmas comedy, which is a Christmas gift for atheists. Okay? Comes in a naughty edition and the standard edition. The naughty edition has more problematic language. The standard edition kind of has a clever way to get around some of the naughty language. Okay? All right. So we are on episode 14. 14 of The Smoke of Satan, which is the methods of propagandism. So this is going to be all about how the modernists get their message out. Okay? And this should be the penultimate episode, which means it's a fancy word for meaning the next to last. Unless I can find a reason to make another one, but I think this is it. So we got one more after this one. And we're going to talk today about the methods of propagandism. But we do want to remind you again about traditional theology and what we are supposed to believe when we are believing in Catholic theology. This is what St. Thomas Aquinas came up with, which was based on what the ancient Greeks came up with in their philosophy, and he added into it the order of grace, which is faith. So we have our senses give us input, and then we apply our reason to that, and that is the source of knowledge, and then from there we have our natural end, but we also have God as a source of knowledge. Okay, through revelation, and that's direct revelation from God, which completes the picture, and we can explain just about all phenomenon in nature, all in the material world with these things. There's nothing left out. A bunch of theologians came up with something saying, we don't think you need all that, St. Thomas. Thank you very much. We don't need this order of grace and direct revelation of God. Let's just consider grace as perfecting reason, grace as perfecting nature, and faith is the perfection of reason. So we don't really need this extra order of grace, which is faith. And let's just rethink everything again through this lens, which is just our senses, just our reason, and grace is part of reason. So, we don't really need this. So, now, they call that ressourcement, right? Because they're resourcing everything and relooking at it. And they call this the nouvelle theologie, the new theology. But this isn't really, when you do this, you get different answers. It's not what we believed for all those years, okay? So, now, let's talk about the methods of propagandism. So, just to give you a little background, St. Pius X has gone through the whole modernist thing in the first 12 episodes. And then in episode 13, he told you about the causes. And now he's going to talk to you about how they try to get their message out and how they go about what he considers kind of corrupting the church and the faith. So, let's read this first little quote from the document here. If only they had displayed less zeal and energy in propagating it. But such is their activity and such their unwearying capacity for work on behalf of their cause that one cannot be but pained to see them waste such labor in endeavoring to ruin the church when they might have been of such service to her had their efforts been better employed. So he's pretty clearly saying he thinks they're out to ruin the church. Okay? He goes on, all right? They recognize that the three chief difficulties for them are scholastic philosophy. That's what we talked about earlier, right? Scholastic philosophy, the authority of the fathers, and tradition, and the magisterium of the church. And on these, they wage unrelenting war. Okay? For scholastic philosophy and theology, they have only ridicule and contempt. Okay? So, they're looking at what St. Thomas did, and they're ridiculing it. They have contempt for it. They say, you don't really need that, external revelation from God, St. Thomas. What is all that about? Huh? Really? That's our faith. Okay? So, excuse me, that's what we believe. Don't ridicule what we believe and be Catholics, All right. So, it goes on. Whether it is ignorance or fear or both that inspires this conduct in them, certain it is that the passion for novelty is always united in them with hatred of scholasticism. And there is no surer sign that a man is on the way to modernism than when he begins to show his dislike for this system. Okay? This is like the first sign of rebellion against the faith, is that you don't like St. Thomas and the scholastic philosophy and scholastic theology. Okay. Modernists and their admirers should remember the proposition condemned by Pius IX. Okay, this is something condemned by Pius IX. It's written in a positive way, but it's something condemned. Okay, this is how we list errors in the syllabus of errors. Okay, the method and principles which have served the doctors of scholasticism when treating of theology no longer correspond with the exigencies of our time or the progress of science. You can't believe that. If you do, you're a heretic, right? According to his predecessor. Okay? Now, there are three chief difficulties for them, which is what we talked about. So the next chief difficulty, first is scholastic philosophy and theology. Next is the authority of the fathers and tradition. So, they exercise all their ingenuity in diminishing the force and falsifying the character of tradition so as to rob it of all its weight. The Second Council of Nicaea will always have the force of law, where it condemns those who dare, after the impious fashion of heretics, to deride the ecclesiastical traditions, to invent novelties of some kind, or endeavor by malice or craft to overthrow any one of the legitimate traditions of the church, the Catholic Church. Okay? So, this goes back to the Council of Nicaea, which is a long time ago, right? So the church has always been battling these heresies, and St. Pius X here is reminding them of that these proscriptions against these things, that this kind of novelty isn't good. We shouldn't be doing it. They're not unique. They're not new. It's the same old kind of heresy cropping up again. Okay? The Fourth Council of Constantinople says, "We therefore profess to conserve and guard the rules bequeathed to the Holy Catholic and Apostolic Church by the holy and most illustrious apostles, by the Orthodox councils, both general and local, and by every one of those divine interpreters, the fathers and doctors of the Church." So he's reiterating again now from the Council of Constantinople that you have to respect the fathers of the church. And it's our job to preserve what we've been given, not to reinvent it or come up with new novelties. Okay. So this continues. Roman pontiffs Pius IV and Pius IX ordered the insertion in the profession of faith of the following declaration: I most firmly admit and embrace the apostolic and ecclesiastical traditions and other observances and constitutions of the church. So, again, the popes do this because people are causing problems. So they have to say, we're going to put this right in the creed, this goes in our profession of faith, that you need to respect these things. They're not new. This is all old, kind of heretical stuff that needs to be opposed, fought against. The church has always been fighting against this stuff. But somehow in Vatican II, we said, hey, let's these guys have some interesting things we should incorporate into our church. And they don't. This was a big, big, big mistake. Okay. That's my editorializing for that. Okay. The Modernists passed the same judgment on the most holy fathers of the church as they pass on tradition, decreeing with amazing effrontery that while personally most worthy of all veneration, they were entirely ignorant of history and criticism, for which they are only excusable on account of the time in which they lived. Okay. That's pretty awful. Okay, they were very nice people, but you can't expect them to know what we know now. We know better now. We know how to do history and criticism now, and they didn't really know this because they were so just backward back in those. No, no, the fathers of the church. They knew what they were talking about. You can't look at St. Augustine and say that kind of thing about him, or St. Thomas Aquinas, or any of even the more older fathers of the church. They knew what they were talking about. They were closer to Jesus and the original apostles than these guys are, and they knew what they were talking about. They knew enough not to go back and say, well, Jesus didn't really perform miracles or whatever else these guys are saying. They're crazy, right? It's not good. It's just not good, guys, All right. So let's see. The Magisterium of the Church. Finally, the Modernists try in every way to diminish and weaken the authority of the ecclesiastical magisterium itself by sacrilegiously falsifying its origin, character, and rights, and by freely repeating the calumnies of its adversaries. So, here he's pretty much calling them out as traitors. He's saying you're siding with the people who are critical of the church and saying, hey, you kind of have a point there. No, they don't have a point. The origin of the magisterium of the church is true, and it's not something to be doubted, right? Okay. To all the band of modernists may be applied those words which our predecessor wrote with such pain, to bring contempt and odium on the mystic spouse of Christ, who is the true light. The children of darkness have been wont to cast in her face before the world a stupid calumny, and perverting the meaning and force of things and words, to depict her as the friend of darkness and ignorance, and the enemy of light, science, and progress. So this is his predecessor calling this a stupid calumny, okay? And it is. And you hear this all the time today, that the church is the enemy of science. The church is not the enemy of science at all. At all. It's one of the, in many ways, it's the great contributor to science and the scientific method. We have great scientists who are in the Catholic Church, right? It is just wrong to think about the Church being an agent of darkness and anti-science and against the light of reason. It just isn't true. Okay. This being so, venerable brethren, This being so, venerable brethren, no wonder the modernists vent all their gall and hatred on Catholics who sturdily fight the battles of the Church. You see this right now, folks, okay? There are a lot of people out there running down people who believe traditional Catholic theology, and they have hatred for them. They really do. Nobody's hated more than the traditional Catholics. These guys are, they'll side more quickly with the political forces of the left right now, which are just completely atheistic and out of control. Okay. Now, remember, I'm talking right here in the year 2020. There's a lot of crazy things going on, okay? But of all the insults they heap on them, those of ignorance and obstinacy are their favorites. So again, they say people who believe in the traditions of the Church are ignorant and obstinate. That's their opinion of that. They despise them. It's horrible. It's not good. Not good. No. You expect that from enemies of the Church. You don't expect that from people who are in the Church or theologians. But they look on some Catholics with disdain. It's not good. Okay. For them, the scholarship of a writer is in direct proportion to the recklessness of his attacks on antiquity and of his efforts to undermine tradition and the ecclesiastical magisterium. When one of their number falls under the condemnations of the Church, the rest of them, to the horror of good Catholics, gather round him, heap public praise upon him, venerate him almost as a martyr to truth. Well, you kind of be happy to know that doesn't really happen all that much anymore, because the heretics are running the Church. Okay? It's kind of the opposite way now. People are getting chastised for believing the traditions of the Church rather than, the heretics being labeled as heretics, and the Catholics going, why are these people defending this complete nonsense? I remember I was at a conference one time, and one of these nuns got up there and was telling me about that, Jesus didn't really multiply the loaves, right? So it was just this, everybody started sharing the food they had brought. And they all just considered it a miracle. And all the people at this conference were like, whoa, no. Jesus was a miracle worker. He worked miracles. He didn't have pretend miracles. Those people knew when loaves were being multiplied and weren't so, I don't want to disparage them, all right? They weren't so misinformed or confused to see people sharing food and think that was a multiplication of the loaves. How do we get people who think that? It's because they're saying miracles are hard to believe in, so therefore they didn't happen. So how can we explain how people could have been confused? No, they weren't confused. They saw a miracle. That's what made Jesus so popular. Not because, people didn't used to share their food and all of a sudden they started sharing food when Jesus was around. I mean, and it's offensive to the people who truly believe, who truly have faith, because the theologians who should have the most faith don't have any. Okay? And we're in this trouble in the Church. But again, it's not like, who's rallying around them. This was when Pius X was coming down on these people for being heretics, and then they would gather together, circle the wagons, defend each other. But that's not what happens now. Now you have any level of heresy you can imagine going on in churches, and even the Pope is patting them on the back, bringing them in, talking to them, saying you're doing a good job. This is what happened at Vatican II. This didn't happen before Vatican II. Let's put it that way. If you don't want to blame Vatican II, blame something else. But something else must have happened, because this didn't happen back in Pius X's day. The right people were being persecuted for heretical beliefs, not the people who actually had faith. Okay. He goes on. They seize upon chairs in the seminaries and universities and gradually make them chairs of pestilence. From these sacred chairs they scatter, though not always openly, the seeds of their doctrines. They proclaim their teachings without disguise in congresses. They introduce them and make them the vogue in social institutions. Wow. I mean, this has completely happened. Our Catholic universities are totally underwater now. They are not Catholic. They profess all manner of heresies. They oppose the traditional faith. It's horrible. I mean, anybody who's paying all that money to send your kid to a Catholic school because you think it's Catholic, man, they're just as corrupt as anything. So they've got all the chairs that are covered by these people with this modernist thinking, and it's a scourge and it's a shame. And we need to reverse it. We, the laity, need to wake up and say to the priests that we're not going to tolerate this lack of faith among the people who should have the most faith. We can't have it anymore. Under their own names and under pseudonyms, they publish numbers of books, newspapers, and reviews. If they treat of Bible questions, it is upon modernist principles. If they write history, it is to search out with curiosity and to publish openly on the pretext of telling the whole truth, and with a species of ill-concealed satisfaction, everything that looks to them like a stain in the history of the church. You see this all the time. I don't know, when anybody talks about the history of the church, they're always bringing up what they see as excesses or sins or whatever from the past. They talk about the church in the medieval times when it was the institutions of learning were in the church. And they look back on it and they scoff and they mock and they think they make it out to be some dark, superstitious, crazy thing, when it wasn't. It was the source of light in the world at the time, in a very dark time in the history of the planet, a history of humanity anyway, right? So, I mean, this happens all the time. I just saw, Bishop Barron just did this. I almost choked. He was talking about Junipero Serra. They're pulling down his statues of him in California, in his district in Ventura. And he's making up saying, well, did he do some things that were excessive by today's standard? Maybe. You don't need to even say that. The man went all out to preserve the rights of the indigenous people, walking all the way from California to Mexico City to talk to the people in charge, saying, you got to stop this nonsense. And he's up there making it and saying, oh, maybe he did something wrong. Get out of here. What did he do wrong? He's a saint of the church. He didn't do wrong. He did right by those people, and they loved him for it. He was very well loved by those people. And you know what? Those people loved being Christians. They didn't like being in the pagan religion where they were rounded up and sacrificed. It was a pretty awful, society there in a lot of these places in the Mexican territories when they were taken over. All right? So, those people were pretty happy to be converting once Our Lady of Guadalupe showed up, and millions of them converted. Those missions were a very positive thing in the world. These people want to say that it was, there's some kind of a, invasion of Western thought forced on these people. They were, where they were was a bad place. You know, those pagan religions were not pleasant. We had many martyrs of the church who came to convert those people. In North America, I know of some that from New York State, this Isaac Jogues, you know, they tortured him. They tortured him to death because there was a drought. They thought he was responsible for a drought. That's how superstitious they were. Killed the priest. You know, who had been tortured and then came back. You know, he came back from France to try again with these people. It's heroic efforts to convert those people to the true faith. And now we have these people. They always want to bring out the bad, whatever they think is bad, by today's light. It's not good. They destroy as far as they can the pious traditions of the people and bring ridicule on certain relics, highly venerable from their antiquity. They are possessed by the empty desire of being talked about, and they know they would never succeed in this were they to say only what has been always said. It may be that they have persuaded themselves that in all this they are really serving God and the church. In reality, they only offend both. Okay, look, I get it. If you're an intelligent person, you want to make your name for yourself. You want to have the prestige, and people think you're brilliant. These are prideful motivations that can possess people, even people who are in the church, to think that they've come up with a new idea. And this is exactly the temptation that the evil one will use for people like this. If you're an intelligent person who takes pride in your intelligence, that's where the attack is going to come. And we shouldn't be surprised at it. But we need to call them to task when they're doing this kind of stuff. Okay? And straighten them out if they don't have faith. Okay. So that is the penultimate edition of the Smoke of Satan. Again, my name is Joseph Cillo Jr. I'm a writer of edgy Catholic fiction. I've been trying to bring people the truth in fiction, which, it's easy. Sometimes it's easier to tell the truth in fiction. You can get it to people in a way. I wrote When the Wood is Dry. It's a thrilling story, but it's packed with religious truth in it. Okay? But you can read it just for the thrills. And yet you get all that good religion. The same thing with Blind Prophet. It's a story about angels and demons and temptation and resisting temptation. Okay? And the boy is the blind prophet, can see the angels and demons tempting. The demons tempting and the angels defending against the demons. And my book, Merry Friggin' Christmas, which is an exploration following an atheist on a journey to the afterlife and back again. Okay? So it's, that if an atheist ever finds himself in a near-death situation, like you hear a lot about these near-death experiences, and he has an experience of heaven, it's got to make him think, don't you think? Now, mine is fictionalized so that he's actually talking with people in heaven. Most people are really, may not get a lot. Sometimes, some of those near-death experiences have some of that, but this is more elaborate than that. It's actually going into some of the things he believes, and, it's a fantasy. But it's a great story. It's got a lot of laughs in it, If you have strong atheistic beliefs, you probably don't want to think too much about having a near-death experience where you're talking to Jesus. I mean, that's like a horror show for you, which it is for him. When he wakes up, he's like, that can't have been real, right? Okay, so check it out. And if you know an atheist, give him one for Christmas, right? What do you got to lose, right? He's probably not getting a lot of Christmas gifts. Anyway, my name is Joseph Cillo Jr. again. I will see you next time on the Smoke of Satan for episode 15, which is Remedies. Oh boy. You're going to love this one. You're going to hear all the things that Pius X tried to do to stop this nonsense. And you know what? You're going to hear that and you're going to say, they're not doing that anymore. What was that all about? Right? So, when you hear these people telling me that you can't change Vatican II because it's already there, you know what? Vatican II changed this. This was already there, and we're not doing this anymore. So, when we start doing this again, then maybe you say, okay, well, Vatican II is up, but this is still here. We're still locking up modernists and telling them you can't go to, conferences and stuff. All the things that he's saying to do. They didn't actually lock them up. I'm sorry, that's an exaggeration. But they told them they can't talk at certain things. They told them you can't have certain positions. There was a lot of things. There's a lot. We're going to go through it all. All the things. They said your books can't be sold in Catholic bookstores. Lots and lots and lots and lots of things that they did to collar these guys. Right up until Vatican II, when they said, come on in, write the documents. I mean, that's how much of a reversal it is. The same guys who were sanctioned back in these days, the same kind of beliefs, they ran the council. The council started with documents that were orthodox, that were produced by one of the I forget his name, but an orthodox a priest, theologian, a Thomist, who put together the original documents. And when the council started, they threw them all out and started again with documents from these guys who were being sanctioned for heresy, some of them. Okay? So, those sanctions, I guess they lifted them so they could be at the council. I mean, that's how bad it was. Really bad. That council was totally corrupt. All right? In the way it was formed. Now, you can go and quibble about each and every document and whether this one's heretical or that one's heretical or what's wrong with this one or what's wrong with that one. But the guys writing them were not orthodox theologians. That's the problem. They had this affliction of modernism, which Pius X called the synthesis of all heresies. Okay? We're going to see you next time. You're going to love that episode, and that's the last one. Okay? Goodbye. My name is Joseph Cillo Jr. Take care. God bless.